July 9th meeting of the Port of Bellingham to order. I'll take roll call. Commissioner Shepard,
I am here from the cloud.
Commissioner Bell,
I am here with my head in the clouds.
Commissioner Briscoe is present. Let the record show all three commissioners are present. Public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for that? Two? Okay, Mr. Jeff is it Lustig? Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all the commission members and staff that are present here today. My name is Jeffrey Lustig, and I am an aircraft owner and operator at Bellingham International Airport. I'm also a condo association hangar owner, and I do rent a tie-down, and I also rent a T-hangar. I rise today and am coming before you to essentially urge your action on a policy that I just learned about today from an email from Mr. Collins, whereby it appears that renters of T-hangars and tie-downs will be required, or actually it appears from the email language, are now required to have a $2 million general liability insurance policy, naming the Port of Bellingham as an additional insured. While it may seem on its face to be an elementary thing to just double the current requirement, which is $1 million to $2 million, I have spoken to my insurance company and myself personally. This will be an additional expense of $2,500 a year for me, and I already have $1 million of insurance across 2 airplanes. I spoke to 5 different insurance companies, agents today, and it appeared to them that this was an excessive standard when compared to other airports around the country. I don't have the data because I just learned about this today, and I happened to catch you all in a meeting. I didn't realize you were having a meeting today, so I'm glad to be able to come forward and talk about this. When you have aircraft insurance, you can obtain the type of insurance coverage that management is asking for. And typically on a 4-seater piston airplane, you'll get $1 million of insurance if you have 4 seats. If you have a 2-seater, you will only get about a $500,000 insurance. So if you're the unfortunate person who's been renting a tie-down from Port of Bellingham for several years, and you have a 2-seat, maybe an old Cessna 150, and there are a few Pipers and Cessnas that meet this description that are currently renting tie-downs, you find yourself in the position of having to purchase several $1,000s worth of additional insurance. Now, there may be good and valid reasons behind this, but I think whenever a new requirement comes out that could potentially have your constituents, the people that are your customers, paying out of pocket to such an excessive rate, I think it gives reason that we might want to slow down a little bit and find out about what type of insurance is really needed and really necessary. The prospect of an individual with a small airplane on a tie-down causing $2 million worth of liability is very remote. If anything, the wind blows over the airplane, it's an act of God. There's arguably no liability for the Port of Bellingham. The person's airplane's damaged and they have to deal with that. But from a liability standpoint, we don't necessarily see where $2 million is needed. Also, when a person buys aircraft insurance, the amount that they pay for aircraft insurance depends largely on the value of their airplane. And we have a vast variance in the values of airplanes at Bellingham Airport. A lot of the airplanes are anywhere from $18,000 on up to $20,000, $50,000. So when a person is required to buy essentially double the insurance, or in some cases 3 times the amount of insurance, you can imagine that their premiums are not going to double. They're going to more than double to get up into those higher limits. And again, with aircraft insurance, they base the premiums on the pilot qualifications. So if you're lucky enough to have been an airline pilot, you're going to pay less than someone like me, who is a private pilot, pays each year or each month. So by changing the insurance limits, I'm concerned, and what I've been hearing, because I do practice aviation law, and I do have a business at the Bellingham Airport that I operate, and we do use tie-downs. My concern is that we may be unintentionally driving operators and owners away from Bellingham Airport, and this is a shame. The Bellingham Airport, as you know, as members of this commission, is a very cherished commodity to the citizens of Whatcom County And I would hate to see, if I just may extend, I would hate to see this policy drive operators who have been there for many years out. And it does affect businesses. It affects my business. It also affects Command Aviation, who use the tie downs to store airplanes that we generate tax revenue and jobs from. So my time has expired. So I do thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any.
I just have a quick one. Do you have actual quotes on the two different limits?
No,
can
Commissioner, I
share
was
with me.
unable to obtain that because I found out about this. I was in court all day. I'm an attorney. I was in court all day, and I did find out about this. And I did manage to reach my insurance agent on the way in, and he looked at my file and felt that I would have to pay $2,500 more. I already pay $1,600 for my Cessna 182 per year, and I pay $850 for my Piper Tomahawk. So if I'm going to pay an additional $2,500, you do the math, that's more than double than what I'm going to have to pay. So, and that's just me. And I don't know what the other people have with their various arrangements and premiums, but I'm very concerned about it.
Yeah, at this point, it's anecdotal, but if you've got actual quotes, would you just sort of pass them on to me at some point? I'd like to see, because when the boots get on the ground, that's when it really matters.
Yes,
They'll go out to
Commissioner.
an underwriter.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I'd like to be able to submit that to you, and I can contact staff to do that. Thank you.
Is there a,
Commissioners, so to be clear here, what the port's requiring, it's $1 million for tie downs, $2 million for hangars, is the liability policy that all tenants pay, no matter what they do. If there's a fire, if they bang into the side of the hangar. And my colleague and friend, Mr. Lustig, is talking about the liability insurance from operation of the aircraft. So I suspect what happens here is when you go out and buy liability insurance, you fly your airplane, you crash it, they provide some coverage. They throw in, oh, by the way, if somebody slips and falls at the hangar you rent or there's a damage to the hangar, we'll cover that as well. The problem is, it sounds like that what happens is they're raising the rate on the more expensive piece, which is the aircraft liability operations piece, to get the increased premium for what all our tenants pay, which is they buy commercial liability insurance if, whether they process fish or sell hamburgers or anything, it's the liability that occasioned by being on port property. And so, Mr. Lustig is a smart guy, and maybe he can help out here. It sounds like it's bundled in the aircraft business. Both those
Please
coverages.
respond.
If I may respond, Commissioners and legal counsel, there are only 7 companies in the United States that sell, 7 or 8 companies, it changes periodically, who sell aircraft insurance. And if you go down to your local insurance agency and say, I'd like to have aircraft insurance, they'll say they're not bonded and licensed to do that. Subsequently, when you buy aircraft insurance, you can buy just general liability insurance, but it is higher. You can also get comprehensive liability insurance with a deductible. But the type of insurance that I was told, and what makes sense to me, is what's called aircraft not in motion. And aircraft not in motion insurance is similar to a general liability, but it is bundled. And when you do ask for the higher limits, it also requires them to raise the other limits as well. It's rare to find an aircraft insurance policy that has varying rates for the different classifications. And I am by no means an expert of aircraft insurance. I'm just a guy that's paid aircraft insurance for the last 20 years. And I know that every year it goes up and up and up. And so if we can work together with community constituents and the Port Commission to come to a happy medium, it may prevent these aircraft owners that have been there for a long time from having to move their airplanes to Linden or to Burlington or to Payne Field. Because I think the general, I was talking to my friend, Mr. Plank, and I know you know Mr. Plank, and he felt that the insurance would go up about $1,000 per person, or $500 in his case. But he has an umbrella coverage because he runs a business. He runs a construction essentially out of his hangar, and he's able to get that. I'm talking about the guy that comes out, or the guy or the gal that comes out once or twice a month and flies their airplane. They may not even have the insurance ability to buy $2 million. They may not even be able to get $2 million of insurance. I'm not aware of any local providers who could come in and give us umbrella coverage because I haven't had a chance to staff this and take a look at this. But when you receive a letter from the airport management saying, you could be removed from the airport if you don't provide this, I get concerned because not everybody has access to the port and not everybody understands how government works. And I would hate to see people leave the airport, and I would hate to see businesses take a nosedive And I know that you work very well with the community, and I know you work really well with the pilots. We love the airport. We want to maintain the relationship we have. And I would hate to see people have to leave because they just feel they can't meet the insurance requirement.
So commissioners, it's not insurance for aircraft in motion or not in motion. And of course, aircraft being flown depends on your hours and the type of aircraft and your experience, you know, what kind of pilot you are. What we're talking about is maybe a separate kind of policy, like all our tenants buy when they occupy our premises, just premises liability insurance. The same policy that surely there's about 400 tenants that provide premises liability. It's unrelated to what you do. It's just premises liability. It's a separate deal. And what I say is I suspect that in the past it's been bundled with your aircraft insurance policies. And so what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to help the commissioner, what I'm hearing is it's really problematic to raise the aircraft side of it because it relates to how many hours you have, the type of seats, the motors, how good you are, whatever. The other insurance, all our tenants buy, and it's just insurance to, in fact, if somebody leases the boathouse, they have to buy a liability insurance policy for the boathouse, whether they have a dance, a sail, a dinner, whatever. It's just that insurance we're talking about. We're not talking about insurance for if you crash your airplane. That's up to you.
Well, that might be so, but I know that the contractor that manages the leases has, at least in my case, accepted my insurance policy because it contains $1 million worth of the type of general coverages that they're talking about. So in any event, it does appear that this is now the policy in place at the airport. And I don't know if I would be out of line in urging the commission to possibly consider easing that policy until a later date that we could look more into this and come up with better numbers. And I apologize again, I just found out about this today and I was fortunate enough to catch your monthly meeting. And I don't run to the meetings and do public testimony. This isn't something I normally do. So I'm honored to be here, but I just wonder if there would be any way that we could somehow get this policy somewhat tabled or deferred for a while until we can kind of understand what this means to similarly situated pilot owners like myself. That would be appreciated. I know you can't always do that, but you know, I know that you'll take this under consideration and that you'll consider all points. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and I would like to talk about this a little later under other business for the sake of getting the meeting moving along. I do have some questions, and I think I had some of those questions before we adopted our policy, so I would definitely like to talk about what you brought up there. With that, we have one more person, and it's Karen Smith, I believe, if I'm correct.
Correct. I'm also a member of the hangar group of worried about the insurance coverage. I'm a member of the Chuckanut Flying Club, which is a nonprofit. I'm the president of the club. And we have 2 hangars with 2 older planes. And we're getting quotes for the insurance, but we're also being told it's going to be high. And of course, as a nonprofit, any extra charges do impact us. And I just wanted to reinforce that concern.
Okay, very good. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else that didn't get a chance to sign up that would like to speak? Okay, that being said, I'm going to read our meetings and then we'll move on to the consent agenda. So our next Marina Advisory Committee meeting is Tuesday, September 10th, 2019 at 6 p.m. in the Commission Chambers here in the Harbor Center Building, 1801 Roeder Avenue, Bellingham. Our next Technical Airport Advisory Committee, the TAC, will be Thursday, September 12th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. in the ARF Conference Room at 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. The next BIAC, Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, will be Thursday, September 12th, 2019 at 5 p.m. in the ARF Conference Room also at 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. So that being said, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Okay. A motion to approve the consent agenda items A through K.
Commissioners, if we can pull item E, this is the professional services agreement for Pacific Surveying and Engineering to complete the bid and permit documents for All-American Marine Storage Yard and Hilton Avenue Improvement Project. We'd like to make that action item number 7 under action items and talk to you briefly about it.
Okay.
Mr. Shepherd?
Well, I had a question on that one, so I'm glad we're pulling it. And on G, I just wanted to say thanks to the Longshoremen's Union for stepping up and helping us to have the service needed for the Alaska Marine Ferry.
Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, I want to talk about G, and I also want to talk a little bit about B as a commission.
B?
B, yeah.
Okay, so I guess,
B is just a general.
Let's do G first.
if I've got this correct, we're gonna pull action, or pull E and move it to action item 7?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to pull them, I just want to discuss them
Well,
before.
no, yeah, but I think we wanna pull E,
correct.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, and we're gonna talk about B and G. Yeah, did you hear that okay, Commissioner Shepherd?
Yep, I did.
Okay. All right,
So
so,
on item number G, my question is to staff. As we take on the payroll, are we also taking on the liability for those employees?
Yeah, I believe we are. Is Dave Warder in the room? Dave, so we're doing this under direct employment with the Longshore Union and then billing the ferry system back, is that correct?
That is correct.
So that liability falls on the port rather than the ferry?
That's a good question.
we're-
Dave Warder, Marine Terminals Manager, Port Bellingham.
That's why you keep me around.
Yeah.
I believe it because they are employed by us, they are covered under Labor and Industries.
How are we reporting those hours? Are we reporting those separate than normal LNI, so we're getting the overwater LNI coverage?
That would be
Elizabeth,
a
do you
good
know?
question.
So we're gonna need to look at that, because when you're doing work over water, it's a different LNI coverage than when you're doing work on land. So we'll have to look at that. But the answer to your question, Commissioner, is yes, we would have that liability, but it would not be a liability against like our commercial liability policy. It would instead be a claim against Labor and Industries or against this overwater at Labor and Industries. I forget what that's called, Frank, do you? USL&H.
United States Harbor and Longshore Workers Insurance.
So if they had an accident, for instance, they would be covered under that rather than a claim against our insurance.
And then what about the instance where they make a mistake and hurt somebody else?
Yep, then that would be under our general liability. That's correct.
So
Yep.
it increases our exposure on that.
That's correct.
so are these people gonna, these folks be required to do training so that this doesn't happen? I mean, so they're trained the same as our staff with whatever they would?
Yeah, in most cases, the longshoremen are probably trained more than our staff because they operate this type of equipment all day long, right? They're running cranes and barge ramps all day long at different ports around the state. So yeah, they're very well trained. And they did work with Dave, and I believe you worked directly with them.
Yes, and this is, going back to your earlier portion of your question, Commissioner Bell, this is similar to their activity if they were doing work at the shipping terminal moving cargo. It's the same sort of activity on port property, just now they're doing the line handling and ramp tending. And the longshoremen that are currently working on the site are the ones that actually worked did that operation back in the early 90s. And the longshoremen did operate that equipment. So they were very quick to remember how everything operated. And then I actually walked them through and made sure that they were fully versed on the operations and the equipment.
Yeah, it didn't matter as much when they were Publius employees, but now that they're ours, all of a sudden it matters. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'm also pleased that they're on the job, so it's just a matter of making sure we get that I's dotted, T's crossed.
Commissioner Shepherd, anything on that?
No, I don't have anything to add.
And you want to speak
My
to
next
B?
one is on B, and I really am looking at B as the approving the capital budget, and it's just my gut reaction when I turn the page over and I look at how much money we're spending this year. And you know, I've been harping on this for a bit, that I really think we need to defer some project cost. I don't want it to impact this specific one, but this one did bring it to light. But there's just a ton of stuff that we're doing that costs a lot of money right now because construction is high. And as we go forward, I'm just asking the commission to appease me in my monologues when I ask for us to show a little restraint on some of the capital expenditures that we have going forward, to see if we can't scale some of these things back to a later time when we will need to employ some people. And again, it's not going to impact the one that I've got today, but I want to make sure that I bring that to light as we go forward. Other than that, I'm ready to vote on the consent agenda.
So, a couple of things before we do that. Maybe we should get together and talk about the things of your concern is, we have one more meeting this month?
No, we don't. Our next meeting is August 13th, I believe, and then we'll have 2 in September. We will have more than likely a budget retreat in September as well, so you'll end up basically with 3 meetings in August. I mean, in September, 1 in August.
And for me, it's just a matter of,
What's your time frame for wanting to talk about this, Commissioner?
before September. I know when we bring the capital budget to light, I would like to at least know what everybody's priority is. So Commissioner Shepard and for you guys as well, if we can at least understand what our number 1, number 2 priorities are as we move into this, so that we focus on the things that we feel are important moving forward, but at least attempt to try to show some restraint.
So the August 13 meeting, if we had an executive session to speak to these items, would be suffice, or
It probably doesn't qualify under executive session, Commissioner.
not going to?
No,
So
we could
it's
certainly
either
do it.
other under business tonight or other business on the 13th.
Yeah, we could add to the agenda on the 13th, and
I think it should be an agenda item for the 13th. Give
Okay.
us time to think about it.
Very good. You agree with that, Commissioner Shepard?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Okay.
And between now and that August meeting, let's at least discuss, let's be thinking about what it is that we want to have in that September budget meeting that we think are priorities.
Everything.
Yeah, that's my problem.
It's not a problem. It's
Yeah.
just, So,
The challenge with this is always that it's a whittled down list already from a big laundry list of things we don't get to. So I feel your pain on this, but we already have a lot of things that are unfunded. But I'm happy to discuss it further.
and my comment would be, we just have to be careful, because when you tell people, yes, we're going to do things, and other folks, make business decisions based on what we said we were going to do, we have to make sure in our discussions we take that into account.
Yeah, and I follow that. I mean, I thought the web locker price was incredibly high for what it was, but we did make a commitment to follow through with that, so that was why that made that an easy vote.
I just told you about my $1,700 pipe tee.
Yes. Yeah, it's just an expensive time.
So is that it on B?
That's it on B.
Okay. Kind of hooked up to G. I'd like to thank our port staff that went to Alaska and spoke on Whatcom County's behalf to make sure the ferry service remained here if possible. And of course, it was ultimately up to the folks in Alaska, and I'm glad they made the choice they did at this point in time. So thank you to staff and everyone who was involved. With that,
Are we gonna, for clarification, are we gonna pull B or leave it?
we're leaving B.
We're leaving it and we're adding it to the August 13th agenda.
No, B is going
No.
to stay where it
He's
is
going to
Okay.
stay where it is.
on the consent agenda. I was just making an editorial comment.
Okay,
So we're pulling E is the only one we're pulling for.
sounds good. Okay.
Okay.
So a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through D and F through K.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard.
I as well.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye, carries 3-0.
Okay, thank you.
Our first action item.
Okay. A motion to authorize the port to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement between Millworks LLC and the Port of Bellingham for the 3-acre Lignin parcel in the waterfront district.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowron, sorry, I almost said Department of Ecology.
You have your own department now. Wow.
I almost said Department of Ecology. Yeah.
You want some coffee?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Is that called self-promotion or what?
Actually, it is my pleasure to present this particular action item for you today for consideration, which is an exclusive negotiating agreement, or ENA, between the port and Millworks LLC for the approximately 3-acre parcel for redevelopment, potential redevelopment of a 3-acre parcel located at the corner of Cornwall Avenue and Laurel Street in the Waterfront District. So the commissioners are probably very familiar with this particular project. We had an excellent presentation a few months back from Maury Ingram, representing the Whatcom Community Foundation and Millworks LLC, to propose a development of a food campus and mixed-use residential project on the corner of that parcel. We received very positive feedback from the commission, and port staff has since that point has been working with Millworks to develop this exclusive negotiating agreement that's before you for consideration. What this is really what it sounds like. It's just an agreement where the port has agreed to take that particular parcel off the market for the time being, while we work on a much more detailed agreement, development agreement, or an MOU with Millworks to advance this project. Coincidentally, we also received an integrated planning grant, which commissioners are also familiar with, from the Department of Ecology, which the port is looking to use in conjunction with this to evaluate housing options on this this parcel as well. So with that, I don't have too much more to explain to this. We do have a few figures here for clarification if you have questions. And we do have a representative from Millworks, Suki Pachorik from Millworks LLC, and she's available to address any questions you might have as well. Staff does recommend approval.
Commissioner Bell?
I have no questions. I'm pleased to see this come forward.
Commissioner Shepard?
So, Brian, where are we with the housing grant? Have we officially, or is that officially coming to us for acceptance, or are we still programming it to maximize its efficiency with this project?
Yeah, that's right. We actually have held off on the actual grant agreement at this stage in order to work more closely with Millworks to define what that scope might be. So, yeah, with this agreement in place, pending commission approval, that will actually be one of the next steps. We'll be working closely with Ecology. We have met with them. They're very enthusiastic about this project and moving these forward together in parallel.
Are we under any time constraint for accepting that grant in a calendar year or anything like that?
We do nothing that Ecology has conveyed to us specifically date-wise. We do want to advance it as quickly as possible just to get it under contract. They have assured us that funding is available, and they're looking forward to working with us. We don't really want to go through the next biennium without having it locked up in a contract, but we're moving much faster than that. So no hard deadline, but we do want to move as fast as possible.
Okay. And what about our proposed timeline for demolition of the existing buildings?
Yeah, from what I understand, our engineering department is working on that right now. We've actually held off. It's ready to go. We're holding off to let the kind of bidding climate cool down a little bit. It's not a time-sensitive construction project. We're looking to do that demolition this fall or winter, but we really wanted to let the bidding climate of the high construction season kind of work through. We think we get better bids for the demo this fall or winter.
Smart. I like that. Last question is, since we've been successful so far getting ecology and commerce attention with this planning grant, how do you envision us being helpful in acquiring implementation funds from some of those same agencies?
Yeah,
anything we can start doing at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. That came up during our conversation with Ecology. They had indicated this is really the first stage of that. They wanted to have us look at the planning level efforts, and if this does look like a successful project that we could advance, they would be promoting using remedial action grants and a variety of other mechanisms to help fund portions of this project as well. There would be some limitations on that, but they've already expressed interest in us trying to use this to leverage additional ecology funds or commerce funds as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions. I think this is a good movement by the port to be involved in this. And I think it's a good thing to do with that property. So thank you for your presentation, Brad.
Thank you, Commissioners.
And you realize as soon as we do something like this, there'll be a lot of people who say, hey, wait a minute, I have an idea for that site.
Right.
Yeah, so we're really, that is going to happen, and we're going to take the heat for that.
Yeah.
But this is a great design and great look.
And it's great to work with a local development partner as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
What's that old saying? If you snooze, you lose? That'd be the one.
Well, this is a beautiful project.
Carrie, if you would, please.
Sure.
All right,
A motion to authorize the port to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement between Millworks LLC and the Port of Bellingham for the 3-acre Lignin parcel in the waterfront district.
Commissioner Shepard.
An enthusiastic aye.
Commissioner Bell.
I can't top that. Aye.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye as well. Carries 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Good luck to the project. Carrie, if you
Okay,
would, please.
yeah. Agenda, action item 2, a motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Masana Construction of Gig Harbor, Washington, in the amount of $1,078,494.23, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $1,186,000, $343.65.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Allen. I'm a project engineer at the Port of Bellingham here. This construction project at the shipping terminal is the third phase of repairs in a multi-phase project to complete recommended repairs from the 2015 conditions assessment completed by Moffett and Nickel. Moffett and Nickel was subsequently contracted to do the design work on phase 1, 2, and 3 of those improvement projects. Phase 1, which was completed in 2016, included timber pile repair and replacements to the north and south terminals and structural repairs throughout the BST. Phase 2 was completed in 2017 and included steel pile repairs in the north terminal only, pile cap replacements, concrete deck repairs, and mooring hardware replacements. Phase 3, which is this scope of work, completes the steel pile repairs in the north terminal. Spalling, it repairs concrete spalling on a deck, replaces the bull rail throughout the BST, and also removes the existing conveyor structure in the north terminal. And future phases of work will be required, and that includes the repair of all of the piles in the central terminal, or all of the required repairs in the central terminal, and various structural repairs throughout the 3 different terminals. So our anticipated schedule for this project, we are anticipating to issue the notice to proceed on August 1st, and the construction is expected to take 150 days. That does anticipate, accommodate potential shipping operations at the terminal, including shutdown days. We're expecting the work to be completed in January 2020, and we got 5 responsive bids from the opening, and they ranged from $1.078 million to $1.9 million. The low bidder was Masana Construction of Gig Harbor, and after reviewing the bids, we are recommending that the commission award the contract to Masana Construction. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Any
Well, thank you.
questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I'm going to go first this time, so I get to, huh? Quite a span between the bidders there. Why an $800,000 difference? What's going on?
Well, part of it was the shutdown time. There was a really wide range between how much they were charging for the 16-day shutdown. One was, I think it was about $5,000, and another one was $200,000. So that was a good chunk of the span. And then the pile jacketing itself, there was a bit of a range. I think $5,000 was the low bidder, and around $20,000 was the highest bidder.
So on that pile jacketing, the 20,000 and the 5,000, are they using the same style, or are we
Yes.
different, or same stuff, just different price?
Yep.
Okay.
It was based on the specifications. We haven't received any submittals from any of the contractors, but it was all based on the same specification.
Okay. Like, yeah, wow, that's a big difference. So,
It is.
that's all the questions I have. Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I've got a question about, now that we're in phase 3 and we have a second item on our action item that also relates to this with additional expenses, what's our ballpark for phase 1, 2, and 3 on expense?
I'll have to get back to you on what phase 1 and 2 cost. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Well, I'd be interested to hear. I continue to support our efforts to make this shipping terminal profitable, but as we all know, we're making considerable investments. This is one of those budget items that makes me catch my breath for a moment because it's a big dollar figure, and we are making a lot of needed upgrades in anticipation that these are going to pay off in the future with greater contracts, greater traffic, greater employment, and greater revenue on this facility. So I'm continuing to want to track that progress towards our end goal. And I'm wondering if we have any, wondering if we could get at some point soon another update on any of our progress towards getting increased boats and ships calling on our port.
Okay, anything else, Commissioner Shepard?
That's it for now.
Commissioner Bell?
I'm going to share your concern, and I look at this, and it's 60% difference in pricing between one contractor and another. My first response is, why? Especially when you're talking about a $600,000 delta in the main part of the contract. And I've never been a fan of just looking at low bid as a criteria anyway, just because I think contractors know how to work change orders to their benefit. So I'm really curious to know, have we done a deep dive to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and there's not going to be a change order coming down the road? By the way, welcome to the commission meeting.
Yeah, it's hammer time.
And it's not a fun place to be, but we try to make it fun.
Right. So all of the contractors that submitted bids, they did bid using the same set of specifications and plans. So theoretically, it should be apples to apples, but you're right, some people do make money off of change orders. And at this point, we don't have a reason to believe that's the case for this project.
These are just the kind of things that stand out in my mind. And
Right.
actually, Greg, this is what I was going to come in and talk to you about at some point, but that's a huge delta.
It is a big delta. Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. It is a large spread. Quite honestly, the last time we did this, we did a very similar project in 2017, and we saw a similar spread. These pile jackets, it really depends on their familiarity and how efficiently they can install these things. And so we've just been seeing a fair amount of spread with the pile jackets. And I mean, we can account for about 195,000 of that delta with somebody's fairly astronomical bid for a 16-day shutdown period, which I would almost account to an error on their bid. I cannot imagine how they could justify $200,000 and even bother submitting a bid. So I would take a look at it and see if that was actually an error.
Yeah, the other part of it was it's not a local bidder. I mean, and we look at, you've got some local bidders there. So here you've got somebody who's not local coming in at a much lower price than some of our local. So
It's
makes
true.
it makes you go, what?
It's to some extent the nature of the public bidding environment. We don't get the choice of selecting the local guy over the cheap guy.
And that wasn't even the point. The point was,
Understood.
if they've got to bring people up from somewhere else, how can they possibly do it for 60% less?
They do.
Well, they might do, but wow.
And they're only about a little over $100,000 under the next bidder.
Who was the next one?
And quite honestly, the high bidder is quite a ways out there, with a pretty good range on the middle three, and the low bidder is not substantially low. So this doesn't cause me personally a ton of heartache, particularly given the nature of the work. It's honestly what we've been seeing with this kind of work. So
I think you have to throw the high bid out too. I mean, when you
I
look
think
at
so,
this,
too.
you're looking at additive number 2, they're at 41,000. No one else is over 16. And when you look at additive number 1, they're at 305 and no one else is over 200,000. So I think you got to throw them out. There still is quite a bit of discrepancy between 1 and 4, but I don't think you compare number 5. That just doesn't look like it's reasonable.
I agree with that.
Their price for pile jackets is pretty in line with what we typically estimate. $5,500 per pile jacket is pretty standard. That's what we usually use for our estimating number. The high bid is 18,000. The next one is 15,000. Those are, I'm not sure where they're coming up with those numbers, given that it's a straightforward installation. We do have some plumb batter pairs that are more challenging to install because they have to do some creative stuff with the pile jacketing. And so I would expect to see high costs there, which we have. But I honestly don't know where the 15,000 that the second low provided and 18,000 that the high bidder provided. That doesn't make sense to me.
And I agree with Rob that the highest price is an outlier and should be thrown. All right, I'm ready.
So I have one more question here. I'm not familiar with the Masana, is that how you pronounce that? Have they done quite a bit of this work? I mean, I'm assuming we researched that a little bit.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
National-wide
It
player,
is
Georgia, Seattle, all over, Texas.
Yeah, I just haven't seen them around here much. Okay, any further questions, commissioners?
No.
All right, thank you. Carrie Wood, please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Mazzana Construction of Gig Harbor, Washington in the amount of $1,078,494.23, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $1,186,343.65.
Commissioner Shepard,
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
This isn't going to come back again. Aye.
Commissioner Rissos, aye. Carries 3-0.
Thank you.
So before we go into the next action item, I'd like to point a couple things out. Commissioner Shepard, we were under the money allocated for that particular project by about, let me see if I can do this quickly, about 500 and some odd $1,000, according to what the paperwork is in front of me. And then one other thing I'd like to bring to light here at this public meeting, and maybe Executive Director Fix would speak to it for me, is the weight the shipping terminal carries when it's up and running like it used to be.
Sorry, there's no question the shipping terminal built the Port of Bellingham. In its heyday, it was the revenue source for the port. I believe currently the shipping terminal has the potential to do somewhere between $3 and $5 million a year in revenue. We're currently seeing anywhere, depending on traffic, $500,000 to $1.5 million. So easily double, if not triple and quadruple those revenue numbers if we start getting consistent business. And I think we're on the cusp of that. I think we've talked to another number of groups, and we're watching the backlog of ships up in both Vancouver and down in Seattle. And I think it's just a matter of time before one of those lines starts calling Bellingham home.
And I agree. I grew up here. I saw what it was in its heyday, and we'll never have the aluminum export and the lumber export that we had, but there are other things available, and we are seeing overflow situations to the north and to the south. So I believe these are good investments, and I'd like the public to know that's why we're doing it. So, Carrie, if you...
I've got a quick question for the being under budget by 500,000. Doesn't that take into account action number 4? Isn't that the rest of the piece of the budget?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
And some design costs as well.
It's included?
Yeah.
Okay.
So action item 4 fills out the rest of that budget line because we still have to pay for the professional service agreement.
That's an increase of about 26,000 for action item number 4. The 500,000 was split between the 3 different phases, and this is specific to phase 3.
Okay.
And we committed to go down this road in more ways than just this. So we've made a lot of agreements to try to bring things into the shipping terminal, so we should continue.
Carrie,
I agree.
please.
Sure. A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with SEA Construction LLC of Raymond, Washington, in the amount of $541,479.27, plus a 10% contingency, for a total authorized contract amount of $595,627.19.
Commissioners, before you vote, can I just add some clarity to that? I think I've got this right, and Jennifer and Greg, please jump in if I don't. The budget is $1,725,000 for this line item. This item is for $1,186,000, and I believe the item number 4 is for additional $26,000.
Yes.
So you would still have $475,000 to the positive. So you said 500, it's just less item 4, which is 26,000.
Okay.
Does that
so
make
the
sense?
500 is the total cost, and we're just doing 26.
Correct. For item number 4, we're jumping ahead here, but yeah, that's right. It's not the full 520.44 of item number 4. It's just a $26,000 increase to get to 544.
Yes. Yeah, that 500,000 included design and construction management for phases 1 and 2 as well. So
I see.
drawing from that $1.725 million budget is a $90,000 design cost, plus this 26,000 additional, and then the 1.1 million.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yep.
Okay, I'm lost. Where were we? I believe it's up to you. You have the stage?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Need to vote?
oh,
I thought we voted on it.
No.
Carrie
No,
read the
I-
motion. I interrupted. You didn't vote yet.
Yes, correct. What he just said. We have not voted yet.
Well, it's because she hasn't presented.
Yeah, she hasn't presented yet.
No,
No.
3.
I know, I just read it once and she hasn't presented yet.
this is my next one.
They voted on 2.
So she's up.
So I'll shut up. I'm
Sorry.
lost.
If you would, please.
You'll come back. You'll come back, Jennifer, okay?
So they look very similar. The presentations do look very similar. So
But who's on first?
Did we vote on 2, though? Are we sure we voted on 2?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
Carried 3-0.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to
Go-
watch the
go,
video
Jennifer.
replay.
okay.
I'm watching the YouTube feed now. I've seen it all. It happened.
So this construction project repairs 4 Port of Bellingham sites that were damaged in March of 2016 during an extreme storm event. The sites are Squalicum Harbor, Hilton Harbor, Fairhaven East and West, and Marine Park. These images show some of the damage sustained at each of the sites. The project was previously bid in 2016 and awarded to Ram Construction, but due to some permitting delays, these repairs were not completed. Since then, the erosion has continued, so conditions are slightly worse than what's in these images. The proposed repairs are needed to maintain the long-term safety and integrity of the shoreline and for port operations and tenants. So the repairs at each site are somewhat site-specific, but this shows the typical repair. What the repairs entail is removing large rock and concrete debris, digging down approximately 4 feet and laying a filter fabric, a filter layer, and then large riprap. Excavation will not go below 4 feet surface grade, and the improvements will not extend below elevation 4.5. So the tentative schedule for this is similar to the shipping terminal. Anticipated notice to proceed is on August 1st with approximately 170 construction days. We're expecting to complete the project in approximately 2 months because this is largely title work, that gives the contractor some flexibility on when they can do that work. And the schedule also incorporates tenant coordination. We have 3 very active tenants on those sites. So that schedule is to minimize operational impacts. We received 8 responsive bids. The bids ranged from $541,000 to $796,000. The low bidder was SEA Construction out of Raymond, Washington. And after reviewing the bids, we recommend awarding this construction contract to SEA Construction. Any questions?
Commissioner Bell?
I have no questions because most of them were answered in item number 2.
Commissioner Shepherd, any questions?
I just want to know if we're future-proofing this construction. This is result of a storm, and what we saw with last winter is we again had substantial storms. We saw extensive damage in Birch Bay that the county is going to be spending a ton of money on, and I'm sure with participation from state and federal sources as well. And so are we building this to last, or are we just repairing it back to the previous standard that it was at?
No, it's not going to be built to the previous standard. The filter material below the large rock was a little bit undersized, so when the waves came in, it actually pulled a lot of that material out, and this material is expected to be sized appropriately.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. I think we're going to continue to see these sort of damages occur as we experience more significant storm events and higher water levels. So I don't think this is going to be the last time we're going to be voting on a proposal like this. That's all my comments.
Okay. As soon as you can figure out that weatherproofing, I'd like to have some of it, so. I guess I have a question. What was I don't recall, what was our permitting problems? Who was that with?
We were having difficulties obtaining the Nationwide 3 permit.
This was pre-agreement with the Lummi Nation.
Oh,
So
okay.
we've been in this permitting process long before we had an agreement with the Lummi Nation.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you for the presentation. Commissioner Bell, any further questions?
None.
Commissioner Shepherd, any further questions?
No.
Okay.
Carrie, if you would, please.
Sure. A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with SEA Construction LLC of Raymond, Washington, in the amount of $541,479.27, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $595,627.19.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Shepherd,
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. 3 carries 3-0.
Thank you. Okay. A motion to authorize the executive director to execute an amendment to the existing professional services agreement with Moffett and Nickel for Bellingham shipping terminal repair projects, Phase 3 construction administrative services in the amount of $24,045 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized amendment amount of $26,449.50 for a revised total authorized contract amount of $544,259.
It kind of looks like there was some behind-the-scenes works to keep you on stage all evening here.
This is my last one. I didn't prepare a presentation for this since it is closely related to action item number 2. This amendment is amendment number 14 with Moffett and Nickel and provides construction support services, including a pre-construction meeting, submittal reviews, contractor responses to RFIs, 3 site visits, review of change orders, and providing record drawings. This time we're requesting that the commission approve this amendment to provide the CM support for that Phase 3 work.
Commissioner Bell. Commissioner Shepherd.
No questions.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. A motion to authorize the executive director to execute an amendment to the existing professional services agreement with Moffett and Nickel for the Bellingham shipping terminal repair projects, Phase 3 construction administrative services in the amount of $24,045 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized amendment amount of $26,449.50 for a revised total authorized contract amount of $544,259.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard,
Aye.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye, carries 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you. Fantastic job.
Yeah, good job, Jeff.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Can we do our break? Come back at 5:30 for the public comment?
If you'd like.
I would like.
Adjourn the meeting until, 5:35 enough? 10-minute break.
Hi there.
Okay.
I just heard that I've been coming across really loud, like I'm yelling at everyone.
Yeah, what's up with that anyways? You go on vacation and scream at us? We didn't ask
so.
if we're there yet, Dad.
Funny.
You sound
we did
really good
leave-
right now. Thank you.
We did leave very early this morning. It was very dark when we
Oh, dark
departed. Dark 30. That's the game with little kids still, I guess.
Okay, well, we're going to continue here. So Greg, if you please. Or maybe you should reread.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I told you you're supposed to shake your finger at me if I'm out of order, okay?
Hey, I'm trying to keep you guys in mind. A motion to authorize the. Sorry, can you hear me? A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with WSP Inc. for alternative analysis and preliminary design for the Blaine Harbor Sawtooth Pier modification project in the amount of $75,090.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. Just to provide a little bit of background on the Sawtooth Pier in Blaine Harbor. The first 4 teeth of that pier were constructed in the mid-1950s. It was then expanded in the mid-1970s. The most recent condition assessment was completed in 2015, which identified a number of repairs needed to extend the life of that pier. In 2016 and 2017, we completed 2 separate projects to complete those recommended repairs. When this pier was originally constructed, the slips were sized to accommodate the fishing vessels that were used at the time. In recent times, fishing vessels have changed and they've gotten significantly wider over time. And we've been hearing concerns raised by the users about the suitability of this pier for the current fishing fleet. In light of those concerns, the port held 2 design charrettes, one held in May of 2016 and the second held in May of 2017. The attendees at those meetings included our consulting team as well as the Commercial Fishermen's Association, the Working Waterfront Coalition, as well as the upland tenants in the Blaine industrial area. The recommendations that we heard from those charrettes included adding a heavy lift section to the pier to allow for mobile crane access, construction of a flat face over a portion of the existing teeth to allow larger vessels to operate on that pier, potentially retaining 1 to 2 teeth of the existing configuration in order to allow for net loading. That would possibly also include construction of a new float along the southerlymost slip to allow seine netters to operate. They have also requested power and water service to the pier, as well as a deck crane. Based on what we heard from those 2 meetings, Port staff has identified 3 primary alternatives for how to modify the existing configuration of that pier. Alternative 1 would keep the pier largely unchanged in terms of its configuration. It would add a heavy lift section. One thing to note on all of these renderings is that all renderings show the web house, number 1, being in place. We're obviously moving forward with the project to demolish that, so that building will not be in place when these improvements are completed.
And it's a touch screen, you can just get rid of it, or what?
Probably, but I'm not that good at it. We would also install a fixed crane, as well as providing water and power service to the pier. The second alternative would implement the flat face, and that would fill in the teeth of the first 4 teeth, the northerlymost teeth. The reason for filling in those teeth rather than cutting off the teeth is that it puts us out into deeper water. By cutting off the teeth,
We'd just be toothless, okay?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like I am. The water gets fairly shallow on the inside of those teeth. The third alternative is largely identical to the second alternative. but would retain the slips 5 and 6 and would construct a float for operation of the seine netters. And I should note that alternatives 2 and 3 would also provide a heavy lift section, a fixed crane, as well as water and power service to the pier. There is a fourth alternative that I will just mention very briefly, that we'd like to just give very cursory attention to, just given the age of the pier, is the potential for potentially replacing the entire pier with a new pier of similar size.
Why just cursory?
We want to evaluate if it's even cost-effective and feasible. We can do additional evaluation if commission thinks that is a viable option. There is concern about the cost of it and if it's what we want to do. Again, if with commission direction, we can add that to the scope of work to do a full evaluation. I believe that would add another about $15,000 to the contract.
What,
How much would it, to replace the entire pier would be how much more?
Just
to do the evaluation.
Do the evaluation. Okay. I was
Alternative
gonna say, well, for
analysis.
that, let's just do it.
I would have done it yesterday.
and then what do you estimate to be the useful life of this pier?
That's really a question of how much maintenance we want to do with it. It is pushing 60 years old on the first 4 teeth.
So am I.
Per the condition assessment that was done, a typical useful life of a pier this construction is about 30 years. So we're beyond that, which doesn't mean that the pier is imminently going to fall down, but rather it means that we have to continue to do repairs and upgrades to replace decaying and failing components, and that will just continue over time.
So I'd like to this is Ken, I'd just like to talk to the other commissioners about maybe adding that other element onto this, because if we're going to have to, if we've got a 30-year life on a 60-year pier, we'll probably spend as much as we would in repairs and replacement and just doing a full-on replacement. So I would love to see what that extra 15 grand would buy us with that assessment.
Okay, and we can
That's just me.
absolutely do that. The one thing I would propose is that we go ahead and move forward with getting, because the current contract gets us to about a 10% design on that replacement pier, and so we should be able to get in the neighborhood price-wise as to what it's really going to take to replace it. And then we can come back to commission and request a contract amendment to add the remainder of that scope. One of the
Can you
concerns
bring
is
Jennifer back? She was a little more agreeable.
What did I say?
I'm a bit confused, and I was under the assumption we were having another stakeholder meeting on this before we proceeded.
We are, but what we're getting here is an analysis of all the different alternatives, right? We're evaluating what each of these are going to cost, getting farther on the design scale. So when we meet with that stakeholder group, we've got more we can share with them.
Okay, because I was under the, when we had the last stakeholder meeting, which I attended, when everybody left, I was under the impression that they were going to have some designs and then come back and see what people saw or thought so we could narrow it down for going further ahead, so maybe there wouldn't be as much money spent.
And that's exactly what we're doing, is getting that design a little further along so that we can show those alternatives further fleshed out. It's also going to get us a better handle on what kind of costs we have associated with each one of those. But the point is that we have included in this contract up to 2 stakeholder meetings. And as soon as we get those 3 alternatives or 4 alternatives, whatever it happens to be, a little further along, we'll then present that to the stakeholders and get their input on that and help us with selection of what the preferred alternative is. At this point, we've kind of used up all of the skills that we have internally to get it as far as we can, and we need to bring a structural marine engineer on board to help get that design a little further so that we can have a more informed discussion about what it is that we're building. I guess that from what we took from that meeting, we had enough information that we could identify those primary alternatives so that we had something more concrete to take to the stakeholders.
Yeah, just a second, Ken. The thing that causes me pause is the fact that now you've spoken to a fourth. And with a 60-year-old pier with a life expectancy of 30 years, okay, we might be changing the whole thing where we're wasting money moving ahead with these other designs. Maybe we should just be talking about, find out whether we should just replace it or not before we move ahead with a bunch of design work that costs that we're not going to use, because if we've got that many problems with that pier, and it appears that we do. I've looked at it. I think it's got some issues. This money isn't going to take us down that path that we're going to spend here. If we're going to go that other way, we're going to be doing it all over again, which is spending it twice, and I don't want to do that.
The intent is not to take this too far. The intent is to take it incrementally and check in every time to see where we're at. And really, there's a certain amount of management decision as to whether or not we want to continue maintaining an existing pier or if we want to move to a brand new pier. And I guess from my perspective, I'd like to be able to present to you something a little more intelligent than what we have now, as far as what these components would look like and what it would require to maintain it if we did keep an existing facility, and what kind of costs we're looking at if we did choose to construct a completely new pier.
So wouldn't it be prudent to figure out which we want to do internally before we move down the road with this? I think you folks are competent enough, and we've done enough work in the near past here with these docks to just kind of a rough ballpark without spending. I mean, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, is if we're talking about putting a new pier in versus the old pier, we don't need to design yet. We need to figure out whether we need to do that part of it.
I think the trade-offs here, Commissioner, because I'm with you. I don't want to spend a bunch of money doing designs we're not going to use, and staff is very concerned that we're throwing good money after a bad pier. So we would much prefer we go down the road of designing a new pier, but we have to all understand that the timing and the cost of that are going to make it not as easy as the fixes we're looking at here. So instead of being something that could be done in, say, 3 to 5 years, we're looking at something that's probably more in the 5 to 10 year time frame.
Depending on what it looks like.
Yeah.
But that seems like a conversation that the stakeholder group could have and give some recommendation on without having all of the design mock-ups that this would pay for. Am I incorrect there?
No, I don't think you're incorrect. I think that's right.
I'm going to just
Go ahead, Ken.
a tangent here. One of the reasons we left is to do a public comment at 5:30, so I want to make sure we don't lose that.
Oh, thank you.
While I make this next point, which is, this fits into my agenda as well, is that if we've got a full-on replacement that we can do in 5 years, that pushes some of this capital expense out to a time when we may need it. Of course, you're the only one listening to me.
I'm listening.
We're thrilled to find ways to make you happy, Ken.
No, I do agree that maybe we should take a different look at this.
So, Greg, are we missing something here? Can we put this on hold until we have our stakeholder meeting and get this, the focus narrowed down a little bit so we're not paying consultants chasing down avenues we may not go down?
We can absolutely do that. Quite honestly, I was not expecting the conversation to go this direction.
You're welcome. Between an engineer and
He thought I was going to be dropping the hammer gung-ho, let's go.
We can delay it as long as we want. We don't have any obligation at this point to execute any contract. The large driver for the schedule that we're currently on was to get design far enough along and select an alternative so that we could budget for 2020 if that is what we decided to do. And so that was the large schedule driver, is to have a budget for the 2020 budget. But beyond that, there is no driver for this beyond any interest in getting the right project constructed.
you said everything I need to hear. If there's not a driver, then we've got time to maybe keep this operational and functional until we can either do a full-on repair or look at the alternatives. So, and that would be my preference.
Greg, question about the stakeholder group. It looked like a pretty solid team of people. Did we have all the right members present for making decisions at these stakeholder events?
In my opinion, I would say yes. I would defer to Commissioner Briscoe on his opinion in that regard. But we had everybody that we are aware of that uses that, the commercial fishermen, the working waterfront, the industrial area tenants. So I think that we've identified everybody that uses that pier, and we've gotten their input if they chose to give it.
And I would agree that everyone was there that needed to be there. The only thing that I find with some of the stakeholders is how far they're looking into the future and the needs in the future for what we're going to do at that harbor. If we're going to, which we are, upgrading the shipyard, we need to complement the shipyard with the proper dock for in-water finish fitting. So there's many other things I think that need to come into play here that some of it was talked about, but not a lot of it. I didn't feel that we were actually had ironed out enough in-depth alternatives, if you want to call it that. I think that we as stakeholders, we should have narrowed it down more than it is here. I think the discussion needs to go on. It needs to be a longer one about what we really need there. This is why I'm hesitant, and I thought we were going to do something to that degree amongst the stakeholders before we spent money on this, because I don't think that there was enough things flushed out there at that last meeting to give us solid direction, and we should narrow it down to two alternatives. We're going to do this or we're going to do this. I think that's more cost-effective and time-effective for staff and the people of the county that are paying for all this. So I'd kind of like to pull this action item or table it for now and have maybe some more internal discussions on the new pier thing, you know, what the cost is, because we don't want to kick this can down the road. We've already got infrastructure problems. We see the mess we got from kicking the can down the road, saying, well, we can do it later because there's more money. It's going to take more money later. So this isn't about me wanting to hold things up. I'd like to keep moving on it and try and get something figured out. But the life of the pier bothers me. I know what it looks like underneath. What did you say per piling to sack these pilings on the shipping terminal?
So the pile jackets that were put under the shipping terminal were about $5,500 a piece. That said, that's not a solution that's really viable for the
That was my next question. Is that piling?
because of the condition of those
Right.
piles. Really, the idea behind a pile jacket is to stop further damage, and a lot of the piles under the sawtooth are in a condition that we're a little too late for that.
What is there, 150 piles under that dock?
I don't have a good count, but that sounds like in the neighborhood.
Yeah, about 150, maybe a few more. So if we had to replace it, just off the top of your head, Greg, what do you think per piling to stuff a steel?
To replace timber piles, particularly if we were posting those piles, meaning we cut them off at the mud line and then bolt a new one on, which I think we can do in most cases. I think we're somewhere in the $2,000 range.
So $300,000 to replace the piling.
All of the piles, yeah.
Yeah. Up? What are you saying?
Well,
Director Fix?
that doesn't include mobilization. That doesn't include any of the
Okay.
soft costs. That's just those piles.
So give me a rough to get the piling there bolted up. What do you think? Just a ballpark. I mean,
I got to think that to replace all those piles, and then you're probably going to end up with some superstructure replacement that's going to result from that. You can't hold me to this, but I'm thinking somewhere in the $1 million range ballpark.
for the piling.
To replace the piling and get the pier effectively up to snuff. The deck is a question mark. There's a ton of questions as to what it would take to really get that thing up to snuff.
So I think we need to table this and move on and maybe iron this out a little better than spending the money on something that we're not going to be able to fix.
I mean, I'm in agreement, and I think really what I'd like to see too is when we come back is what are our options, especially if we decide to go with a new dock, because we've got some issues about water coverage. So we know the Sawtooth has got certain areas of coverage where it doesn't. So how do you fill those in a proper manner, and what does the new dock look like if we're going to do a new dock?
That's really good.
I mean, there's just there's a whole slew of things I think we can answer if we just spend some more time on this.
Now that we're talking about a new pier, I completely agree. Quite honestly,
You were just going to brush it off.
I was trying to be gentle about it because it was not really all that well received previously.
Nice, the hint was nicely dropped.
And so I honestly was not expecting it to get much traction.
That's because reality hit us when we start looking at what it's going to cost to keep this thing alive for that period of time. We might as well build a new one.
Well, you can put a whole box of Band-Aids on that thing and it's not gonna quit bleeding.
That's an excellent analogy to the situation, is that it's going to continue bleeding and you're going to keep putting Band-Aids on it. I mean, if you asked me just for my personal opinion, I would absolutely replace it with a new pier if you're looking for a 50-year life out of the thing.
Or more.
Commissioners, a couple options available to you here. You can table this till a meeting in September. You can vote it down here, and we'll bring you a completely new action item in September. That's your choice.
I'd like to see the latter.
Carrie, if you please. Or Commissioner Shepard, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to here?
Yeah, could you just make sure and that we all know when the next stakeholder meeting is so we can participate?
We'll make sure that's on your calendar, yes.
Thank you.
Carrie, if you please.
So I'm new. Do I read this
Just
again, or
read-
do we
just
move on to the
Read the
next one?
motion.
So we can take the vote.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with WSP Inc. for alternative analysis and preliminary design for the Blaine Harbor Sawtooth Pier modifications project in the amount of $75,090.
Commissioner Bell,
No.
Commissioner Shepard,
I'll be a no as well.
Commissioner Briscoe's no,
Okay,
does not pass.
thank you.
Because I'm forgetful, we have a public comment period that was supposed to have been at 5:30, and I apologize. Is there anyone, and no one has signed up, is there anyone here that wishes to speak on anything that has not signed up? Please step forward and give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Lyle Jansma, and my address is 3013 Edens Avenue, Bellingham, Washington, the Birchwood neighborhood. The reason I'm here this evening is my friend Jeff Lustig got a hold of me in regards to the increase in the insurance requirements for the airport tenants. I'm a new aircraft owner. I bought my airplane about a year ago. I'm also a tenant. I own a hangar that's in the condo association. I did not hear anything about a need to increase the insurance requirements. So this was something that was kind of dropped on me new, but as a tenant of the airport, something that I would have liked to have known about. In a conversation that Mr. Lustig had with his insurance agent right outside the door, it was kind of described that the ability to get this insurance, if I could even get it, would probably add an increase of $2,000 per year. But the likelihood of being able to get the insurance, and I'm not even quite sure, I'm not speaking too smartly on this because it was sort of just dumped on me today. But what I wanted to speak about a little bit here was that as a lifelong resident of the Birchwood neighborhood, having grown up, the airport has been an integral part of my life. It took me 10 years to be able to get my pilot's license. So as a pilot, every little expense is important for me. I'm not a rich man, but I've been able to save, been able to buy an airplane. I've got $50,000 into my airplane, $55,000 into the hangar that I bought. And when I hear of increases of $2,000 a year and I don't understand what that might be, it is a little bit concerning. So I'm here to put a voice to general aviation. In the year that I've owned my airplane, I've been able to understand how many people come from out of the area to have their aircraft serviced here in Bellingham. People are trying to keep general aviation alive through those services and whatnot. And what I would like to, understand as a tenant, I suppose, of the port, is why this increase, what's the reason for it? It hasn't been explained. I don't understand it. And I just would like to understand what the need is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And in just a little while under other business, we're going to discuss this. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll continue along our journey.
Sure.
Carrie, if you would, please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement, PSA, with Mead and Hunt to provide engineering consulting services in the amount of $420,108 plus a 10% contingency for a total contract amount of $462,119. Authorize the ratification of a Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, Airport Improvement Project, AIP, grant number 3-53-0005-57-2019 for the federal share amount of $711,000, advance the associated capital improvement plan CIP funds of $180,000 from 2020 to 2019 for the RSA compliance design and add additional CIP funds.
That was a mouthful.
I think Carrie has said everything. I don't have anything to add.
I think we have to get an oxygen bottle over there for
You're
her.
welcome.
And Craig, to save us time, why don't you lead with the throwaway line so that we can just go directly to what you were going to consider.
Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. Just to provide a little reference on this project, the runway at the Bellingham International Airport has what's called a runway safety area that surrounds that runway. That RSA, as it's called, has a number of very specific requirements for how that area is constructed, that there can't be any obstructions in that area, it's a secure area, and it has to meet very specific FAA requirements. The RSA at the airport actually has a couple of deviations from the FAA requirements. Deviation number one, which is shown in blue, is that the grade on the northeast corner of the RSA is steeper than is allowed. The second deviation is that approximately 1,700 square feet of the RSA actually extends outside of port-owned property and into the right-of-way of I-5 and is owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. In an effort to resolve these deficiencies, Port staff has worked with the FAA, Washington State Department of Transportation, and the Federal Highway Administration to identify alternatives to resolve both of these issues. The first issue being that a portion of the runway safety area is not owned by the port. They evaluated a number of alternatives, and it was agreed upon that the best course of action was for the port to acquire the portion of the WashDOT right-of-way that the RSA extends into. The second issue is the grade deficiencies. In 2018, we employed Mead and Hunt to help us with a RSA improvement study in which we did an alternative analysis for reconciling that grade issue. Three alternatives were identified, one being an earthen embankment, the second being a retaining wall, and the third being a combination of those two. All of those alternatives would construct a new restricted access roadway along the perimeter of the RSA to provide emergency access. The preferred alternative that was selected by the team was to construct the earthen embankment. Unfortunately, I don't think that this thing is going to work. I have a video.
Uh-oh, no way. So what's the right
Nope.
one?
I don't have a video.
You got my hopes up.
I know. I apologize. But this rendering gives you an idea of the area that we're talking about. The blue dotted line, or I'm sorry, the red dotted line is the extent of the runway safety area. The proposed alternative would complete the grading shown in this brighter green area, and you can see that it would construct a new restricted access road along that perimeter. The next steps to move forward with this process is to start with design, land acquisition, as well as the environmental review of the project. The costs associated with this are eligible for FAA grant funding. FAA will reimburse the port for 90% of all costs associated with this. To assist us with this effort, we're requesting authorization to execute a contract with Mead and Hunt to complete the design, land acquisition, and environmental review for the project. It's anticipated that we'd go to construction on the project in 2020. Again, this construction costs would be reimbursable to 90% from FAA grant funding, with the port being responsible for 10% of those costs. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Bell.
No, this falls under that category of this has to be done because the FAA tells us it has to be done, even though it's maybe silly.
It makes absolutely no sense.
It makes no sense. But they're going to pay for it. They're going to tell us to do it. We have to do it.
I think that's correct.
Fair assessment?
I think that's correct.
Commissioner Shepard.
Yes, a massive amount of time and effort and money for a very little scrap of dirt. But thank you for all the work that's gone into it. It's something we need to do.
With no impact.
Yeah, the big wheels of big government turning at its best here. Certainly in this country, we all know that we could be spending the money on better things. Our airport has operated for how many years, Sunil, with, or Greg, either one, without?
The safety area, the runway safety area became a congressionally mandated requirement in '95.
Right.
So we've had 15 years to fix it, and we just haven't been able to get approval to acquire the property outside in the federal right-of-way. And now we've got momentum, so this is time to get it done.
Right. No, I agree, but I was going to say 15 years ago, had they let us do this, it would have been a lot cheaper.
Right.
So, thank you. Government at its best. Commissioner Shepard, any more questions?
I do not.
Commissioner Bell? And I have none. Carrie, if you please. Thank you, Greg.
A motion to authorize Executive Director to execute a professional services agreement, PSA, with Mead and Hunt to provide engineering consulting services in the amount of $420,108, plus a 10% contingency for a total contract amount of $462,119. Authorize the ratification of a Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, Airport Improvement Project, AIP, grant number 3-53-0005-57-2019 for the federal share amount of $711,000, advance the Associated Capital Improvement Plan CIP funds of $180,000 from 2020 to 2019 for the RSA compliance design and add additional CIP funds.
So you're going to want to shorten these up from now on when you're typing them, huh? Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
And Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Carries 3-0.
Thank you.
So now we have the ghosty number 7, which is actually consent agenda item E, correct?
You got it.
That is correct.
So, Carrie, if you would, please.
Sure. A motion to authorize the Executive Director to execute a professional service agreement amendment with Pacific Surveying and Engineering to complete bid and permit documents for the All-American Marine Storage Yard and Hilton Avenue Improvement Project in the amount of $48,410 plus a 10% contingency for a total contract amount of $78,121.
Thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Gibson, Project Engineer. This PSA amendment would allow PSC to prepare permit and bid documents for this year's capital improvement project on Hilton Avenue. As you can see in this photo, We did not complete the full width frontage improvements in 2016. Since that project was on a highly aggressive schedule, we opted to only complete the improvements that were outside of the 200-foot shoreline buffer. However, All-American has now determined that it needs to use a portion of the launch route across the street from their building for an outdoor storage area and parking area, and that will require us to complete the frontage improvements in front of the subject property. The City of Bellingham's street standard for this area requires parallel parking on one side of the street. At All-American's request, Port staff members are pursuing a departure request with the city, which would allow 90-degree parking instead, and that would accommodate as many vehicles as possible. This is a preliminary site plan that shows the work PSC would assist with. Our work would essentially be limited to the areas highlighted in purple and red. The area in purple would be improved with the necessary stormwater facilities, landscaping buffers, and compacted gravel surface to accommodate All-American's equipment and parking. The area in red would be paved and striped for parking with a concrete gutter, depressed curb, and apron. The portion of sidewalk on the right, which is highlighted in gray, would be handled separately by a private developer. And finally, on the left, the area in green is the existing parking for the trail visitors. And the city has indicated that they would prefer to leave that in its existing condition. The cost of this contract amendment would be about $53,000, including a 10% contingency, and staff recommend approval of the requested commission action. Before you issue your vote, I understand that members of the commission have expressed interest in extending these road improvements farther west. If that is the commission's direction, we can ask PSC to prepare another amendment proposal for that area. In preparation for this meeting, real estate staff reached out to our tenants on that end of the road to solicit their feedback, and I'm sure they would be happy to relay what they learned. And I can
I'll just comment on that because that's why I pulled this off the consent agenda, Commissioners. We've talked to, after speaking with you, I think it was at our budget retreat, request was made to look at what it would take to extend the road all the way to the end, bitter end boat works there. Staff did that and approached the tenants there, both Bornstein and Bitter End Boat Works, and neither one of them were in favor of extending the road down that direction. So in addition to the increased cost, we got some pushback from some tenants, and that's why I wanted to check in with you before we went further down that road. What you have in front of you, I believe, is just doing the improvements to All-American Marine.
That's correct. So it would just be going up to the crosswalk for the existing trail.
So I have a question to what you said. Were the tenants going to be charged anything?
No, but they're concerned that the sidewalks and the street improvements would take away from their existing parking and disrupt, in the case of Bornstein, their truck traffic.
Given the sentiment of the two tenants and given the fact that I would like to save a little bit of money, I'm not in favor of extending that down to the end. I think I would like to honor the wishes of Bornstein and Bitter Ends and just end it at All-American Marine. That's my take.
Well, I think I believe I'm the one that brought it up.
I can't remember who brought it up.
We weren't going to point that out.
Well, no, it's fine. I mean, you need to figure that out because sooner or later something's going to be done there. And while you've got the companies there working, it's cheaper to have them there once than twice. So, but if the folks down the hill that did the business down there don't want it done, the city doesn't want to do it, then I guess we don't have to do it. I mean, I'm good with that. We asked everybody, and that's what it was about, was finding out what they wanted to do.
And at some point, if the tenants want something down there, there will be tenant improvement costs that go with that. So I would assume that
That'd probably be shortly after we drop the gavel on our decision.
hello.
Rob, are these planned costs that we had all along, and they're already factored into All-American's lease rates, or do these change the leasing rates that they have?
Taking the road improvements to the point we are today has been the plan all along, and yes, those are built into the All-American Marine lease rates.
Okay, so these are anticipated as for a number of years as part of the whole package that we were designing and implementing for them.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Shepard?
I don't have any.
Commissioner Bell?
Nope.
I have none. Thank you. Carrie, if you would, please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement amendment with Pacific Surveying and Engineering to complete bid and permit documents for the All-American Marine Storage Yard and Hilton Avenue Improvement Project in the amount of $48,410 plus a 10% contingency for a total contract amount of $78,121.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard?
I as well.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Carrie Surratt.
Thank you.
I think that finishes our action items unless I'm mistaken. And we'll move on to other business at this time. You have none? Commissioner Shepard?
Well, I'd like to start out with talking about the GA insurance. I appreciate all the individuals that came and spoke with us. And from what I heard today, we're hearing somewhat of a repeat or a reiteration of what we heard at our last meeting, that the insurance is challenging to get for some of these individuals. It's more costly than what we were initially anticipating. I think initially I was under the impression that this was going to be in the 10% increase range, and it seems to be quite a bit more. And that there are a lack of just not a huge variety of options for getting this insurance. It's not an area that I've never shopped for insurance in this market, and I'd really like to get some more information from our staff about the impact that this is going to have, and if we're moving in the right direction. I've just become increasingly concerned that we're not, and I think also share some concerns with those individuals about the rollout and notification process.
So, Commissioner, just a couple points of clarification there. I think there's a lot of confusion about what insurance we're requiring, and we're requiring $2 million. And Frank, surely correct me if I'm wrong or say anything wrong here, but we're requiring $2 million in general liability insurance. This is not hard to get insurance. Our tenants get this insurance all the time. What's been spoken to in several of the public comments here is aircraft insurance, which is completely different requirement than what we're asking for. I recently was in an arbitration where a guy had a slip and fall on ice resulted in $800,000 award to him. This was just a slip and fall on port property. Now, the port insurance carrier did not have to pay a penny of that because we were named as an additional insured, and we had enough coverage from our tenant that the tenant's insurance paid that $800,000 bill. But you can imagine when we got $800,000 award for someone that slipped and fell, imagine the damage an airplane could do. We had one that almost hit a fuel tank, a year or two ago. It slid on the runway and almost hit a fuel tank. It had hit that fuel tank. It would have done a lot more than $1 million worth of damage. And then the taxpayers of the port's insurance would be on the hook for that, everything over the $1 million. So I also understand that a lot of the other airports are only at the $1 million general liability requirement. They're not at the $2 million requirement. But I'd bet some money that by next year at this time, they're going to be at $2 million. Someone had to go first. And we took the lead on that, as sometimes the Port of Bellingham does. And the others will follow.
Are we certain that they can break out the insurance with the liability without impacting their other, what seems to be the more costly insurance? Because it seems like that's been a challenge for some of these individuals.
I don't buy aircraft insurance, so maybe I'm not the best to comment on that, but I do buy a lot of insurance, and the general liability is generally sold separately from the aircraft, and it should be able to be quoted separately. I also want to comment that we're hearing these doubling of pricings, but no one's brought a quote to us on paper and said, here's a quote that shows my insurance company doubling the price, or here's 2 or 3 quotes I've obtained. We're hearing it all anecdotally that, my insurance is going to double, or it's going to go up by $2,500 or $200 a month. That's what we're hearing, but so I'd like to see some hard facts on that as well.
Commissioner Shepard, any more?
Yeah, I would too, and I think Commissioner Bell already requested for those documents to be shared. So I would like us to take a look and make sure that we do our due diligence in parsing out if the insurance can be pulled apart into those two separate categories and purchased in an adequate way. If it really is a $2,500 increase, that's substantial. But I think we need to get to the bottom, and we've heard a similar case from multiple people, and I want to make sure that we follow up accordingly.
Okay. Commissioner Bell.
Well, unfortunately, Director Fix stole a lot of my thunder because a lot of it is anecdotal, and I do think some of you were talking about things that were not necessarily well informed, and I'd like to be better informed before we make this call. I'm heavily involved in the insurance for different reasons, and I know where insurance markets are going, and they're not going down for liability purposes on anything that we do, whether it be an operator on a job site or whether it be an office building, right, Shirley? So I don't see the limits going down anywhere anytime soon, and I do think most of the stories that were relayed today were anecdotal. If we could get some hard numbers for those, and we had underwriters that could give us actual policies, and to see what the actual impact was going to be, so we had hard facts and hard figures to work with, that would help. Plus, I really want Mr. Lustig to come back up because that was about as nice as we've been treated at the microphone since I've been here. So we look forward to having you come back with some hard facts.
So where I'm at on this is I'm confused. I think like you guys are. Okay, I've heard several different things that we can do and we can't do. I know how insurance works. I buy it every year, lots of it. I think the first thing we need to do is get clarification for everybody, because I think that some of us are unclear on what we're talking about. Director Fix has tried to explain that. I know you gentlemen, I think, are unclear on what's going on. You've stated that. Frank has tried to clear that up a little bit. I think what needs to happen is maybe staff can provide them with exactly what they need. They can provide that to their insurance companies and see what their response is, and we can talk about this again when it's clear what you actually need to buy, and we can tell them what you actually, or you can tell them what you actually need. I think we've got some miscommunication going on. I believe your numbers. I mean, you hear numbers like that all the time. I'm not so sure that what was conveyed to the insurance company might be the coverage you need. So the port certainly doesn't want to chew on your pocketbooks if we can help not doing that. On the other side of the coin, we do have a responsibility to the public to protect the public, which you folks are involved in as well, protect the public's property from being sued and taken advantage of monetarily. So it's kind of a double-bladed sword for us up here, and what do we do is correct. We don't want to injure, you guys' income or wallet or whatever you want to call it. And on the same hand, we have to look out for this side. So we're not sitting up here trying to do something that's going to dig in your pocketbook and maybe make you move away from our airport. We don't want that. So I would like everybody that's involved and has the time to try and get together, figure out exactly what it is we need. Maybe Sunil and Frank can explain that to you so we can get a correct quote from your insurance companies, and we would certainly like to see that, because if there is outlandish as you're speaking to, we're going to have to figure something out. So that's, what you're
Commissioner,
asking for.
I'll work with real estate who manages this insurance, and Sunil and Frank, to get some sort of something out, an email or something out to all the GA community that says, here's what we're recommending you go buy.
Right.
And we'll be very specific on
Yeah,
that.
so that their insurance companies know
Correct.
exactly what's going on.
Yep.
And at this point in time, that's the best we can do, and we'll go from there, if that's palatable to you folks. If you would like.
Thank you for
Yep.
recognizing me. Just for a point of clarification, I did submit the actual packet that came through the email. We received this morning, and there was a PDF file that contained what looked like minutes, perhaps. I'm not sure if they were minutes from this commission or maybe from staff. Mr. Collins, I think, is still here. He probably knows what was sent out, and I have a copy of it. And that is what I sent to my insurance agent, and that is what he based the information on. But I do agree with the executive director that it would be very helpful to have something that is more specific. I'm not an expert on insurance, but one of the areas that I would invite the port to consider is that there is a big difference, I believe, between whether there should be insurance related to the tie down or whether it's just needed for the hangars. Because I think when you have a fully enclosed area that has a lock on it, you can't see what's going on in there. And persons who are renting those hangars often store petroleum products and maybe even other items, and that's been an ongoing issue at the airport. That's vastly different liability and exposure than someone who is just tying their airplane down in a space literally the size of this foyer right here. So that would be something that may be a way that we could protect the interests of the sport pilots and people like Lyle Jansma who have an interest in this from the standpoint that I do as well. So, but I'll certainly do whatever I can to cooperate, and I have a relationship professionally with Mr. Schmelek, and it sounds like that we can meet and talk about this. So I really thank the commission for hearing us. This was an impromptu thing that we had to put together today, and it's quite refreshing to have our elected officials take this seriously and respond in the way that you have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about your relationship with Frank.
Yeah, well, we're not going to hold that against you.
I will bring up the tie down with staff, and we'll bounce that around because I don't think that's been discussed before. That might be a way that we can help this a little bit.
That's where I was a little bit confused as well. When I gathered that an airplane tied down is a tenant, but it's not the same as having a hangar. So maybe there's a breakout there. So that's the kind of things that need to be discussed out and clarified. Commissioner Bell, anything further on this subject? Commissioner Shepard, anything further on this subject?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Shepard, other business?
Yeah, I've got a couple. One, I wanted to just make a public reminder that the port is soliciting RFP submissions for a native art proposal for the Bellwether property, and we are collecting those through the end of the month, if I'm not incorrect.
That sounds right.
Okay, great. If anybody needs details, we have on our website, or Judy is our main contact on that. I had a question for Dawn. I believe you presented today with the County Council and the Business and Commerce Committee. Do you have any update for us on your presentation?
Time do we have?
He's grinning, so this must be going to be good.
Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development. In general, I think the presentation went very well. I think the committee was looking for the county council to be more proactive in what we recommended. I think there will be more steps to this process. We were aware that in general the cities control housing in their own cities and not the county, but we are a county committee, so we were trying to find a way in which the county would influence all the cities and together come to solutions on what we're calling a crisis, and we would like the agencies in the city and county in planning to see it as a crisis and act much quicker than they are. But in general, it was a long presentation. They gave us about 20 extra minutes. And I think universally everybody agrees there is a very bad issue relating to housing. And there are different opinions on how to deal with it. The Business and Commerce Committee is trying to make it very clear that not only are they having a hard time growing here, but there are many businesses that are choosing not to come here because of the housing crisis.
So just to back up for the context, for those who might not know, the Business and Commerce Committee is a group of some of the largest employers throughout the county who have been meeting at the request of the county council. Dawn has been chairing that committee and organizing it. And one of their first action items they wanted to work on was around housing. And they've really from the start have been articulating that the challenge for their ability to be viable businesses, to expand, to retain the employees that they have, and to see other like businesses locate here to create clusters of like organizations with the lack of housing we have. And so that group has been making some recommendations, and those are the recommendations that were presented today. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I think the single message we wanted everybody to hear was that we're looking for solution-driven answers, not roadblocks to why it can't be done.
Great.
And I happened to attend that meeting as well, Commissioner, and I was disappointed, to say the least. I'm going to be a little less diplomatic than Don Goldberg was. In that we saw a tremendous amount of resistance and a tremendous pushback to new ideas as they were presented. There seems to be more people interested in preserving status quo or not doing some of the hard work that the committee recommended. I think I heard more reasons to stop pushing for these new ideas. And there's just some things that are antiquated. When we look at some of the zoning laws that we've had, they've been evolving since this county was established, and nobody's ever gone back and said, are those still valid in this day and age? And what the committee was recommending was, why don't we have an independent group look at the values of our community and maybe start over based on what we can do today. That was received, not well received. So I think a lot of what the committee has done, the county council has been resistant in trying to accommodate that. And I was I actually walked out because I was disappointed in the way the council received some of those recommendations. And I just hope that the council will look at that response and look at the committee members, because I don't know that you're going to assemble a group of people that qualified with that kind of a detailed recommendation again if they don't listen this time. And that's my biggest concern.
And one last comment. I think if we really see it as a crisis, not a problem, but a true crisis, if we had a major earthquake or something occur, we would change our focus to deal with what's immediately needed. And so I think the driving force here is that we're at a point where it truly is a crisis, and we want action to occur quicker than it would in a normal process.
So I didn't attend the meeting, and probably better so that I didn't after what I've heard, because I tend to speak how I feel about things, and I'm probably going to do it here in the next couple of minutes. When I was elected and I came to the Port of Bellingham, and we had a meeting upstairs with all the directors of staff and some other people, and one of the things I explained to staff was that no wasn't in my vocabulary. No doesn't work for anybody. No doesn't get us anywhere. No stops us. And there's always a way to get something done if it needs to be done. And I think the county council needs to sit up and understand that no shouldn't be in their vocabulary. And it's disheartening to hear that when you have a committee put together, and you put that committee together so that you don't have to figure it out yourself, and that's generally why committees are put together by other politician people and so on and so forth, is so they don't have to figure it out because they don't have time, I guess. But when that committee comes to you with good information, you should act on it, not disregard it. I'm very disappointed that the information was disregarded today. It's very disheartening, and it's sad to see that that's where we're at.
Well, we still, I wouldn't say it was entirely disregarded, and our message was heard. They agree with it. It's just the action part, and that's what we plan on pushing. Our next meeting, Commissioner Carol Frazee is our liaison to the county, and so we will be meeting with her at our next meeting and requesting for Ms. Frazee to start talking about which items can be done. My staff and I are already talking about a way in which the county can lead the cities in a process. So we don't plan on stopping the process moving forward.
At one point, we discussed how it would be almost better to have a full-blown package to bring in for an up or down vote, with all of the changes incorporated in that. Because what appears to be happening is that people are picking around the edges, and they're nitpicking little pieces of this as we go. And I expect that to be how these operations will work. I mean, everybody's got a point. And they want to nitpick it. I'm almost wondering if the committee should come back with just a full-blown package, take it to the council and say, give me an up or down vote on this.
One of the issues, which is true, that we were aware that the majority of the housing responsibility is at the city level, and this is a county committee. So that's some of the conflict is what can the county enforce or make a decision that would affect the 7 cities within Whatcom County. And what we're saying is that we work all the time together. This is an issue that is occurring in all the 7 cities as well as the county. So as a leader, the county should take the position of organizing that with my staff.
And I may disagree
Okay.
at one point, Don. No action is a soft no. It's easier than saying no. Taking no action is easier than saying no, is why it's not done that way. And to finish my no comment with the folks we had the meeting with upstairs when I first started, I'm proud of our staff here at the Port of Bellingham, because I see it issue after issue after issue here, that when there's a roadblock, they're talking amongst themselves and they're working with each other to try and figure out how to get around it and get the job done we're supposed to do. And thank you, staff, for doing that.
Well, Don, I appreciate the time on this, and I do believe that the county council members that have been involved in the committee, they've been active, they've been participatory, and I think they do understand the gravity of the situation we're facing around housing. There's probably realistically some differences of opinion on how to get from point A to point B, and I hope that those differences don't hold us back from making real progress, because we know we need to act on this, and we need to be addressing the full spectrum of housing, from things that are affordable all the way through market rate. And on that topic, and on the topic of what the county council can do in particular, I'd encourage you, Don, to connect with Mr. Paul Schisler. I've been in a little bit of conversation with him recently and seen some proposals that he's put together about actions that the county can take, and utilization of some county resources that could make some impacts on particularly the affordable housing part of the market. Paul's has some particular expertise and was instrumental in founding Colshan Community Land Trust here in the community, which is one avenue for creating affordable housing.
Okay, and Paul's here today at the meeting.
Oh, great. Hello, Paul from the cloud.
And part of my,
Clouds, you got more than one cloud?
What's
up with that?
One of my other concerns was that there are some things that are being thrown at the housing problem that we have no solution for. We can't fix capitalism, for example, and that was one of the levies. We're not going to fix those certain things. So having the county focus on things that they can do, and get off of the things that we have no impact on, would be a huge step. And we've had this discussion. I'm done.
Okay.
Anything further, Michael?
Okay. Yeah, I've got one other thing. I wanted to just relay a conversation that Adrian and I had. We had a productive conversation with some representatives of Puget Sound Energy. We were talking about the solar project on the ferry terminal, and different avenues we have for really trying to address that lengthy payback period that we have. And PSE has a couple options that they have for contributing to the project. It's not a lot of money that they were talking about contributing, but it would be in exchange for the acquisition of the renewable energy credits for a 5-year term. It could help get us a little bit of the way there. The more interesting piece was researching tax equity partners. And I bring this up because they said it's a practice that they've seen happen around the state with other municipalities. It's a way that the municipality, which is not a taxing entity, is able to leverage some private, whether it's a bank or a conglomeration of individuals, to put some money into making the project pencil out, and they are able to recoup the tax benefit. And it seems to take a little bit of management to get off the ground, but has some potential for impacting around 30% of an overall cost. And I'd love to see us look into that. And I want to just reiterate that there's a time-sensitive nature to this because the best tax incentives exist through the end of this calendar year. So it's something that after 2019 will not be as attractive for tax purposes. That it will still be a option, but that the amount, the 30% portion is going to drop incrementally over the next few years.
So what are you asking us to do?
So, Rob, if you can look into this and connect with Adrian on different opportunities we would have for looking at tax equity partners to see if that is able to bring down the investment that we would need to make on this project. And I think it's really just us kind of researching if this is a good idea for us and if it's worth the time and effort.
Yep, we'll do that.
Great.
Glad you got it. Okay, anything further, Commissioner Shepard?
That's it for me.
Commissioner Bell? Okay, I have one thing, and it has to do with the aviation. We have, I think it's Meridian High School has some things going, and, you know, Sunil, what can the port do to, you know, how can we get involved in this and help make things happen?
Commissioner Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation. So about 3.5 years ago with the Airport Advisory Committee, when we were looking at challenges in the aviation industry, one of the challenges that we talked about was the emerging looming shortage of a skilled workforce as the baby boomers retire. And people focused on the pilot shortage. That's one issue. There's a significant pilot shortage that's occurring because of mandatory retirement on one end, and the other issue is that there's an extraordinary leap in the amount of time that a pilot needs to actually fly before they can fly commercially, and that was legislated after an accident in New York. So the other shortages that don't get talked about are skilled workforces in terms of airframe and power plants, so mechanics that work on airplanes, and then air traffic controllers, as well as management and skilled workforce in running airlines and fixed base operations and those things. So we were looking at, well, how can we take that challenge and turn it into an opportunity at the airport as we look at diversifying businesses at the airport. What's unique here is we've got some institutions of higher learning that we can partner with in conjunction with the school districts. So what we saw initially was some partnerships between school districts and institutions of higher learning for vocational training programs, where a student could go to high school, enter into a dual enrolled program, and when they graduate, they not only have a high school diploma, but they have an associate's degree and a skill set that they can immediately take to the marketplace after passing an FAA exam. I'm talking about airplane mechanics and so on. We've got a couple of repair stations on the airport. We've got airlines that can use line maintenance. So that was a low-hanging fruit that we could focus on. Similarly, schools can have curriculums that have air traffic control training programs because we used to rely on the military to do that. Less and less as the military people retire after a full career, they're not entering the civilian workforce. So that's another area. And finally, pilot training. There are opportunities. We have excellent flying weather. We've got an airport that has the full Part 139 safety requirements. We've got the aircraft rescue firefighting station on the airport. There's no reason why we couldn't have a robust flight training program here. So what we started to do was talk to the universities and the colleges, and we got some interest from the technical college and the Meridian School District. So Meridian School District has now partnered with a Seattle-based aviation school to provide a program. And I think the people that are engaged in this, members of BIAC as well as some council members from other places, City of Bellingham, they want the commission to become more engaged in this dialogue. And I think what they want the airport and the commission port to do is further this discussion and find opportunities, both in terms of funding, facilities, and partnerships where we can create vocational programs. And that's where we're at with this.
So what I'm hearing is that there needs to be direction from commission to move this forward. Am I correct? And is that what I'm hearing?
Eventually, it'll come to you as some recommendations, but really, the port's role is one of a facilitator, right? We can provide the facilities, we can provide the land, we can even negotiate the land rates to allow aeronautical type training activities that at lower than market rates. There are ways to incentivize this, but the partnerships have to occur between the learning institutions at the secondary level and the post-secondary level. And the idea is that if you can save a student 2 years of college, you're saving them a considerable amount of money, and you've given them a marketable skill. And it enables them to stay where they want to live, where they were born, where they've spent their life. Now they have to move away. One thing in the aviation industry we all know is if you want to be successful in the airports business, you move around. I've never had a permanent home anywhere. Most of my managers will not if they want to be successful in this business in the long term. But pilots tend to migrate from place to place. Mechanics, not so much. Mechanics can pretty much stake out a place and remain there. So we think that there are opportunities here for airframe and power plant type activities. And in our master planning, we've actually identified areas for an innovation and technology park, sort of a campus for higher learning. So STEM, science, math, engineering, those sorts of skill sets that are becoming more and more important, as well as cargo logistics, things that will need support from an airframe, power plant, and technical workforce.
So I think you said it was 2 years ago we talked about this?
About 3.5 years ago, we began the conversation, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we began that long enough ago. We need to start trying to do something to facilitate this. Commissioner Bell, where are you? You interested in this, or?
Yeah, always. I'm a big fan of this type
Well,
of
I
activity.
think it's going to take the three of us up here to make a decision to give direction that we do something. Commissioner Shepard, where are you at on this?
What are we being asked to do?
Well, let's see if we're.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up, Commissioner Briscoe. I love this idea. I've had a couple conversations with Sunil and somebody from the city council on this. I would love us to engage more with Bellingham School District and BTC on participation in this program and really put some force behind it. It's just a win. It's a great example of economic development, and it mobilizes on a clear strength that we have here.
So are we going to put a strain on staff? Is this going to stress, if we're to move forward with something, to try and engage with a committee, or where do we go from here with this?
Well, I guess I'm not understanding what we're going to move forward on. I think the port staff has been working on getting this together. We can't force Bellingham School District to come. We can't force the technical college.
Right.
We did get some response in Meridian School District, and I believe we got some response in the technical college. I think we're moving on it. I don't believe we're not working on this.
There's momentum. The next meeting, I think, is going to occur sometime in the latter part of September. And the idea is to get more school districts involved. There are lots of school districts, so it's a little bit fractured. But we've also signed a lease and agreement with the Whatcom Young Aviators. So at a small scale, we have people that bring students to the airport and give them hands-on training in disassembling and assembling aircraft components, just becoming familiar. And of course, the airport has put on the Airfest. This year it'll be the second year. Mm-hmm. The whole idea is to engage young people in aviation, and that's why we started that program.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ron.
So maybe how we can leave this is we'll continue to make this progress and get a meeting together for September and report back to you in early October as to what occurred at that meeting, who all attended it, and how much progress we've made.
I just think that, everybody's been, and there is some stuff being done. I get that. I would like to see the port be a lead facilitator in doing everything we can to get this thing started, so our young people can stay here if they decide to do so. They can stay with their families. They've got one other thing to look at in this county where there's hope that they can stay and make a good living wage job right here. And I think that's part of our job as a port commission, is to try and put those ideas forward. So I guess the best direction we can give is whatever we can do we need to do. And we need to do it now, not later, because, you know, the kids are getting older and we're getting older, and we need to get something in place to keep our people here so that they can make money and afford to buy a home and so on and so forth. So if there's things that the commission needs to give you direction on, or we need to give you help on, I think all three commissioners, if I'm not mistaken, are in agreement that we want to see these programs move forward as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think we'll send you the invite to the next meeting. I think there's interest in having commission participation. It's been staff all along. There've been some city council members, and now they've engaged the county, the chair of the county council, I believe. The next meeting happens to be a tenant and aircraft operator at the airport. So yeah, we'll get you in those meetings.
Is that going to be the BIAC meeting? Is that the one?
No, these are separate meetings, so we're still trying to coalesce around a date in the latter part of September, and then we'll send notifications out.
Just don't make it around Sea Feast.
Absolutely, we'll make sure it's not.
Okay, that's, I just wanted to bring that up. I did have some conversations with some city council folks, and I knew there were some things going on. They asked where we were at, and I said I wasn't sure. But, you know, I mean, we're moving on that, and that's good. Behind the scenes, sometimes that stuff, we need to talk about it so that everyone knows where the port's at with it. And it's a good thing to get it on record on TV, because I know personally that there are people that watch this that like to call you up and say, what were you talking about? So I think it's good exposure, because people do use the YouTube to go back later and look at it, and it explains to them that we are involved in this. We're not just sitting by watching, and that we do want to expedite however we can help in any way. So that's all I have. Does anybody have anything else?
Yeah, you brought it up when you brought up Sea Feast.
Okay.
So I just want to remind everybody that Bellingham Alive has a Best of Northwest Washington, or Best of Bellingham competition. Sea Feast has not won that competition. I think Sea to Ski has won that every year as far as the best festival goes. So I'd like to put that on your radar screen. And you do have to vote for 10 different things. So while you're at it, there's a little clothing store in Barclay Village.
Here's the pitch.
No, but Sea Feast really does need to be on everybody's radar screen. And I do think that if you guys could all go on, you can vote from every platform. You can vote from your laptop, from your notebook. Just let's get Sea Feast on the map. Bellingham Alive.
September 21st and 22nd.
Be there or be square. Anything else? Anyone in the audience have anything to say or like to speak, or just don't throw vegetables, please? All right. Meeting adjourned.